Okay. Oh, this is exciting. Can you hear me? Okay, why can't I hear y'all? Because y'all are muted.
Hi.
I am unmuting you. Oh my gosh, Patty, I'm so excited!
I'm super excited, girl.
Jennifer, I'm so excited! This is so...
Hi, guys.
Why haven't we done this before?
Why haven't we done this?
We could have been doing this the whole time we've known each other.
Right. I know, right? We have to do this. We have to do this more. We can't, this can't be the only time.
I know. Well, I'm hoping to kind of make this be like a regular kind of deal. Like, I don't know if it'll be every couple weeks or once a month or whatever, but I'm hoping that that will. Okay. Okay, so we'll wait a couple more minutes.
Lisa, I just sent Karen the link.
Okay, she should have gotten the email. I sent it out to her last night.
Oh, I don't know. She asked me to send it to her.
Oh, okay, no worries. I sent it out. I had somebody else that said they didn't get it, so I don't know what that is. Dylan! Yay, Dylan's here! Dylan is a rock star. She's gonna be a fan. I can feel it. Hey, Karen.
How are you?
I am so great. I don't know why some of you are muted and some of you aren't. But I don't
doing?
Okay, Sarah, Oscar, this is very exciting for me. Lori's here. This is awesome.
Nice to see you in person, Lisa.
It's really nice to see
I
you in
get more or
person
less.
versus our email. So it's perfect.
Not quite in person, I guess.
No, but it's as good as it's going to get for a minute, I think. Okay, cool.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Mama.
Carrie's here. This is exciting for me. My favorite Virginia advocate is on this call. She is a rock star. Let me just tell you people what she did this year. Carrie has helped me so much since moving to Virginia, and I got mad love for this woman. She spearheaded the effort in Virginia to pass the reform for fishback individuals this year. So for 25 years, people have been in prison when their jurors were never told that parole had been abolished in Virginia. And it is astonishing to me. In 1995, Virginia abolished all parole. And for 5 years, jurors were not told that parole had been abolished. So in Virginia, jurors recommend the sentences that defendants are found guilty. And so for 5 years, these jurors were given sentences, 80-year sentences, 100-year sentences. I've seen people convicted of nonviolent crimes in Virginia get over 100-year sentences for property damage, for stealing wheels and tires. I mean, the craziest things you've ever seen. But the point of this whole rambling is that Carrie spearheaded this entire thing this year. From start to finish, she was organized, early morning, late nights, rallies, all sorts of things. And I'm so proud of her. And I just wanted to give her a quick shout out for all of her hard work, because as of last week, all people affected by fishback are now parole eligible, which doesn't mean they'll all be getting out immediately, but at least now they have a chance that they've never had before for
That's
a quarter of a
awesome.
century. So I just got mad love for you, Carrie, and I just had to give you a shout out. So yeah. Okay, so I want to get started because I want to kind of try to keep this an hour. I know we all got things to do, but I've been thinking about doing this for a while, and when the Innocence Network conference got canceled, I really wanted to try to figure out a way to cultivate community and build resources and relationships with people that are interested in the same things that I'm interested in. And when I got started advocating, it was about 4 years ago, it's a lot of swinging in the dark. It's a lot of trial and error. And I really didn't have anyone that I could go to at the time. So it was a lot of like, I followed a few cases prior to my becoming an advocate. And so I would go back and I would look at Ryan Ferguson's case or Marty Tankliff's case. Those were cases I followed, and say, okay, what did they do? What worked for them? What can I try to do that's going to help me? And for a long time I said, you know, we really don't have a game plan, a book to go by that we can all figure out what to do. So it's a lot of trial and error. But when you go back and you look at these other cases, you can kind of come up with different ideas that might work. Moving forward, I thought it would be great if we can all kind of work together and create relationships to try to help each other. Then I thought that would be helpful to not just me, but to all of us in this fight. So I'm going to do my little presentation, and then I'm going to hand it over to the great Oscar Michelen and let him answer some questions that we had people submit. And Oscar is a complete rock star for justice. He was involved in David McCallum's innocence case, Calvin Buari. I've been working with a journalist for about 1.5 years that was involved in Calvin Buari's case, so that's near and dear to my heart. And Oscar continues to work on innocence cases, so I'm just so honored that he would be willing to take some time to be here with us. So I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of
Looking forward
course.
to it.
And in the end, the last 10, 15 minutes, we're just going to be talking a little bit about self-care, because as much as, you know, we all want to work 24/7 and we all want to kill ourselves to get our loved ones, our friends, our clients home, we really have to remember that we have to take care of ourselves, because burnout is a real thing. You don't want to wake up and walk away from something because you run yourself down so much or encounter illness or stress or all of those things. So my good friend Lori has agreed to give us a little bit of some different tips for self-care and meditation and those kind of things that can kind of help us along the way. So Lori, I'm so appreciative of your time and doing this with us as well. So basically, I'm going to start out with some basic thoughts for this Zoom. We're not going to go too much in depth on any one thing right now, but just kind of go through some basics. And then as we do more Zoom meetings, as we go on, we'll get into more specifics and kind of like hone in and dig deep on some different issues. If you guys have like specific ideas of things you'd like to cover, please feel free to message me, email me, text me, whatever, and we will try to cover as many of these topics as we can in the future. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just dig in. Basically, the only easy day in any one of these cases is yesterday. When you get involved in this work, every day is going to be a new, interesting struggle with some problem that you are going to face. And you have to really try to hit things with a positive attitude and be creative in the way that you're approaching some of these different things. Sometimes you won't know what to do. And so sometimes you're going to have to ask questions, or Google was my best friend, like for the longest time. And some days I think I talk more to Google than anybody else. It's like, hey, Siri, how do I do this? And so that works out really well too. But also like, you know, building resources and friendships and networking with people that have maybe faced the same issue as you have, so that you can kind of like hit these different obstacles quicker and smarter than what I did in the beginning. So you don't waste 2 months on something that, you know, really just did not even require that much time. The second thing I'd like to say is be really careful when you're making promises to clients or to loved ones of wrongfully convicted individuals, because I've seen so many people heartbroken that they thought someone was coming in to kind of save the day or promise to provide a resource, whether it be financial or otherwise, or take on a certain task, build a website, any of these things. And when those things don't happen sometimes, it's really heartbreaking. So just be careful if you're new to this, when you're making progress. Sometimes the things I suggest to people is doing it task by task. So maybe you know that you can build a website and you can't commit to running social media for that person. And so you do the first task and then you hit the second task later on when you're done with the thing. But taking on too much at any one time can really create a lot of like hurt feelings, frustration, toxicity in a relationship, any of those kind of things. Next, I would say when you're getting involved in this case, you kind of have to like figure out what court records you already have and what you need to get. So it varies from state to state. In Virginia, I don't have access to a DA's file. And in other states like Tennessee that I work in, I do have access to those things. So kind of like determining what you have access to, where the holes are and what you have, and trying to gather all those things in the beginning so that you can start going ahead and going through everything meticulously. And it kind of helps you determine where the holes are in your case when you have all those files. I know my friend Tara's on this call. Tara's a champion at getting all the records, and she really does a deep dive, and she likes to get everything. She's got this whole binder system that she does that's really remarkable to me. And so she's got a system, and I think we all kind of start to do that in different cases that we work on. You develop what your system is, and you try to gather everything in the beginning. And that way, when you're going to try to get professional help, whether it be a lawyer or an investigator or those things, you have everything that you need. You have the bones of what happened, so you can provide that to them up front, and they're not taking their time spent trying to gather court records, transcripts, DA's file, investigative file, whatever it may be. The other thing I would say when you're talking about gathering the court files is also investigating the people that were involved in this case. So I work on a case in Pennsylvania. My good friend Karen is in Pennsylvania. She's on our call.
Yes.
There is a notorious prosecutor in Pennsylvania. His name is Roger King, and he is the devil as far as I'm concerned. And Roger King had some very specific things he liked to do. We call them Brady violations in my world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So knowing the players that are involved in your cases, knowing what kind of things they've done in the past is really important, because when you go through your transcripts, your case file, all those things, you're going to want to try to draw parallels, whether it be with a prosecutor or police officers or whatever. I don't like to think that they're all bad and they all do bad things, but like sometimes people do things that maybe is not even intentional, but it just happens. But you need to have your eyes open for some of that stuff as you're going through it. And you know, investigating those people, being aware, educating yourself on all the people involved in the case rules. The next thing I would say is trying to identify the problems and the holes with the conviction. Whether it be you think that a witness lied, whether it be you think that evidence was withheld, whatever you think the problems were in the case. Sometimes for the first case that I ever worked on, the prosecutor came up with this crazy narrative. It was really a story. It was like make-believe story at kindergarten time. And he created this whole story that the crime happened in a certain way, in a certain type of car. And my cousin had that car when I was in high school, and I knew it was not freaking possible. It was a Geostorm car, and he was trying to say that this girl was raped and murdered in a vehicle that was like very small with two very large men in it. And it made no sense. So sometimes when you're just going through and you're making notes of these things, what ultimately happened in that case is a documentary was made about that case. And the filmmaker was fantastic, and he got an engineer to go back and to do a schematic, like to try to recreate what the prosecutor said happened. And it was not possible. There's no way it even came close to possible. So you want to try to identify what the problems were, whether it be with like the evidence or with certain witness testimony. Sometimes you have co-defendants that they give contradictory testimony. And so making a point of all those things so you can help a lawyer later on, or whatever the professional is, if it's an investigator or whatever, that can be really helpful down the line. And then kind of coming up with your own game plan. So with the issues that you have in your case, what is the best steps moving forward that person is going to need to further his case in the courts? So sometimes it's a private investigator to go back and reinvestigate everything, because maybe they just had tunnel vision on this one narrative and they ignored all these things over here that were happening. Sometimes it could be misconduct from police and prosecutors. So you need to try to identify what the problems are in that case and come up with your game plan. I can't tell you how many days I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing today? And if I don't have that game plan of like, no, I got to keep my eye on the prize and this is what I'm doing right now until we get finished with this, then that's a problem for me. Because sometimes I just feel depressed about it. It's like, what is all this for when you don't have a solid plan to move forward? The next thing, and this is kind of a really hard one, at least for me, because I talk a lot, is coming up with a brief, like an elevator talk. So that when you run into an Aaron Moriarty, or when you run into a reporter, Frank Green in Richmond, Virginia, or some of these different people, that you in a few minutes can describe your case. And so you hit the high points of what the issues were in the case. You talk about what proves your wrongfully convicted individual, what proves their innocence, and keep it real unemotional and like analytical. Boom, 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 and list those things out to be able to kind of communicate that to someone concisely. Is everybody there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm sorry. Everything just froze for a second, so that was weird. So yeah, so coming up with that minutes of a talk can be really helpful down the line, and describing your case to people that may be interested in helping you professionally. And then the last thing I would talk about is really using websites and social media to raise awareness. For the cases that I work on, I'm afraid of any facts, right? So I love to give people access to as much as I have access to. If I want people to read the trial transcripts, I want people to read depositions of people, you know, later on admitting that they lied, or post-conviction evidentiary hearings and things like that, where people have recanted their testimony and they list out why they lied or these different things. Don't be afraid of the facts, and not everybody is going to do a deep dive like some of us would in these cases, but there are people like me 4 years ago, I'd never done this before, that when I got involved, I was like, this just doesn't make any sense and I want to read more about it. And so for like 3 weeks, I just did all the due diligence I could and learning everything I could about that case to make sure that it was what it said it was in the documentary that I had watched. And then so using social media and websites to push out your what you believe happened, pushed out the problems with your case, raise awareness about your individual. You know, I want people to know about my clients. I want people to hear directly from them. So, you know, Andy Krivak, when I'm talking to Andy Krivak up in New York, I want people to know the kind of person that he is, because he wouldn't have committed that crime. I want people to emotionally invest in a positive outcome in his case. And I need that from them. You know, and maybe your case isn't a wrongful conviction. I know I see some of my friends from Virginia on here who work on excessive sentence and juvenile parole. I see you there. I see you, Jana. She's another rock star. But you want people to connect with your clients, and you want them to see them for who they are. John Brookins is a good one for that. Karen does a great job of all these incredible things that John does in prison in teaching yoga and meditation. I want them to see all those things about my guys and the female client that I have in Tennessee. I have a tendency to say my guys, but anyway, you want people to emotionally invest and know them like you know them. You know, that's super important. So those are kind of the things that I'm gonna leave it at for today, as far kind of like the basics of things. I'm sure there are some questions, and I'm happy to address questions for my little section, so we kind of keep this to an hour. If you want to set up a phone call to chat, if you want to send me an email with some questions or different things, I'm totally down with that. And you know, I hope we can kind of like develop some rapport and some relationships here where we can help each other along in the cases that we're working on and further each other's case. So that's what I've got for tonight. I'm going to hand it over to my friend Oscar, and hopefully he's going to give us some more good stuff to think about. Okay, I'm going to unmute. Okay, Oscar, you should be good.
Okay, thanks so much, Lisa. A lot of great points there. And, you know, I've been practicing law for 32 years now, just about getting the hang of it. In the last 14 years or so, I say, I got into wrongful conviction and have exonerated 6 folks in the last 14 years in 5 separate cases. None of them were the same. They had some similarities, but we don't take DNA cases. When we get inquiries from families or inmates on DNA cases, I send it over to my friends Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld at the IP, who pretty much have that down to a science. We've sent them a couple of cases that have ended up being exonerations through DNA. So we work on reinvestigation cases. I'm a private lawyer. I have a firm that deals mostly with commercial litigation, intellectual property, things completely unrelated to wrongful conviction. So I do this kind of on the side, if there is such a thing, because as anyone knows who gets involved in this, very hard not to want to do this, all the time. It's the most rewarding and most frustrating type of law that you could get into, all at the same time. So one of the questions that came up is like, can family, what can family do to help? And, we get a lot of, especially after every case that I get exonerated where there might be a news story on it, we get a lot of requests for help. One of the benefits that's come out of the lockdown is we had 150 pending requests from inmates and family for help, and we were able to answer them, and all of them in some ways during this lockdown. So how do we choose those cases to work on? How would I pick out of 150 requests? I could only do 2 or 3 cases at a time, quite frankly. And so many times the first letter goes back that just says, thanks, but we're very, very busy right now. And I'm working on a case right now that I didn't reject, but I told the family 2 or 3 times over the last 6 or 7 years, I can't look at it, but take this step, do this step, and get back to me. So, I don't recommend for family members to go out and try to interview witnesses themselves. It's hard to separate your, emotion and attachment to the person, and you have someone in front of you who might be reluctant to give you that information. It's hard not to just want to, kind of shake them and say, I know you're lying or whatever. And it's always better to have a third party, usually a private investigator, if you could afford it, to do the interviews and do the questioning. So when a family member requests our help, when we get a letter from either an inmate, one of the first things we do ask is, does your family support you? If neither your mother or your father believe you, that's not a good sign. So who is there on the outside that can help us coordinate it? And we want to see that there is at least one person. And in the last case that I worked on, Larry McKee, his family had completely abandoned him, totally abandoned him. It was a childhood friend and his childhood girlfriend who stayed with him and who had stuck by him and until we were able to prove his innocence. So it may not be a family member, but someone on the outside that can communicate with the lawyer to just kind of organize and be a liaison. It's gotten a lot easier for us here in New York to communicate with our clients because there's something called JPay that I could actually email a client now. And we can even exchange photos and documents. We have to be careful because it's not confidential. In Andy Krivak's case that I'm working on with Lisa, the inmates actually have a tablet now that they get for good behavior, and you can schedule video talks, you could schedule emails, you could transmit documents that way. But the best thing the family member can do is try to focus. Very important what Lisa said in our responses. I always need to see what is the angle. We get so many letters that just say, I'm innocent, I need your help. I mean, we can't really do anything for that person. So, did you have an appeal? List the appeals. What were the issues you raised on your appeal? Organize your case to say, what is the avenue that I think is the best way to prove my client or my loved one's innocence. There has to be some kind of path. We found a new witness, or we need to track down a witness. I have DNA that was never tested. We just found, this document that we didn't have at trial. So that's the best thing that the family can do, is organize the file, organize the exhibits, the documents, tell us what you have, tell us what you need, what you don't have, what you're missing, and kind of coordinate, if you will, the response. So that's certainly, um, extremely helpful to me, particularly where I don't have, an innocence project behind me to do that kind of groundwork. Um, with respect to getting documents, I know that, Lisa mentioned that a little bit. I can't tell you how important it is to be persistent and to be consistent. In a case that we've just filed now in Andre Brown, in the Bronx, the client made 3 requests under New York Freedom of Information law, and was told, was given a set of documents, said this is all that there is as far as police records and DA's file is concerned. And he kept pushing because the documents he gave showed that there should be more documents, and he filed, like I said, 3 successive Freedom of Information law requests. We then got involved, filed our own Freedom of Information request, and found a multitude of additional documents. And then we filed our 440, which is a motion to vacate his conviction. And lo and behold, the DA, answered back with other documents that we never got. And so there's so many cases that you could look at, that you could see the persistence of trying to pursue those records. One of the things the family can do is try to find a lawyer who at least can familiarize. Let's say you're just starting this process and you want to start looking. Well, you don't even know what records are out there. So either by doing research on other cases or by trying to find a lawyer who's willing to just answer some questions about what should I be looking for? What are normal records that are in a police file that I should be able to get under the Freedom of Information law? Where do I write them for, and do some groundwork on that? The other thing that I think is most important is you have to realize that the criminal justice system values nothing more than finality. Okay, that is the guiding principle of the real day-to-day criminal justice system. It is not justice. It is to get through cases, it is to finish cases, and it's to never think about cases again. So getting anyone really interested in looking at an old case, all the cases that I deal with are at least 18 to 20 years old, is not an easy thing. And it requires a really, really thick-skinned willingness to be frustrated, rejected, discounted. And that's with all of the new media, around wrongful convictions. One of the things that we've seen is about 5 years ago, I'm going to say about 4 to 5 years ago, there's a real wave of love over this area. And we had states just immediately settling cases. We had people, looking at cases. Everyone was developing wrongful conviction units. Well, I could tell you that now, based upon the fact that there have been so many documentaries, so many settlements, so many wrongful conviction units started, we are starting to see courts in a lot of states look the other way now and say, wait a second, we better slow this process down. So you're not going to be greeted with open arms the way you might have been 4 years ago or so, especially here in New York. I can tell you that we're seeing that firsthand. I'll just keep going through some of the questions that were sent in advance. Someone asked about mentally ill, a wrongfully convicted inmate who's mentally ill and is trying to alter their treatment plan. So, of course, the Constitution provides that we're supposed to give inmates proper medical and mental health. But the reality of it is that prison health systems and prison mental health systems are atrocious. So, the only thing you could do is most prisons here in New York have a counselor who is assigned to each inmate, and you have to try to go through that counselor to make sure they get the proper medical care. If not, here in New York, you can bring a petition to get medical care for a person, but it's very, very hard to do. Um, the question was, can a mentally ill person give you power of attorney? That's going to depend on their level of competency. Um, it's the same with anything else. If the person is capable of making their own decisions and their mental state allows them to do that, then they can certainly execute a power of attorney. Any power of attorney you execute, this is in any area of law, should be what's called durable. And that is, the power has a sentence that says this power of attorney survives any future mental illness or mental incapacity. So, for example, even if you have a loved one, a parent who is, you feel, let's just say they just got diagnosed, for Alzheimer's, and they're still mentally competent, as long as they're competent when they sign that power of attorney, if it's a durable power of attorney, that's the legal term for it, it survives any future, mental decline. So the same would be for any other kind of mental incapacity that a person might have. For example, let's say if they're medicated, they're competent, and then they go off their meds, they're not competent. As long as it was signed and notarized at a time of competency, and you could establish that by a video, you can establish that by an audio recording, you can do it just on your phone. Obviously, the notary can attest to it also. It doesn't matter if they later on become mentally incompetent. So yeah, they can sign um, a a power of attorney as long as they're competent, mentally competent at the time that they sign it. Um, yeah, an inmate can self-advocate for mental health within the facility through a petition to the Department of Correction. It all goes through the Department of Correction. But again, very, very difficult to do. There is an organization, Prisoners Legal Services here in New York. The Legal Aid Society has a prison advocacy program. You can contact them. They can help you advocate for certain things for incarcerated inmates to get mental health and to get physical health as well. We're seeing lots of folks bringing petitions to try to get early release or compassionate release for folks who are exposed to COVID and are at a higher exposure rate. I could tell you that those are granted on a very, very rare basis, particularly for violent folks who are in for violent crimes. We're not seeing a lot of success in getting folks released early based on COVID. The last couple of questions relate to how do we get attention to the cases? Well, I think Lisa touched on that a lot by saying social media is certainly a good avenue for that. We like to start by finding a local reporter in the neighborhood where the crime occurred. So there's always, listen, if you could get to Dan Slepian at Dateline, who does a lot of these stories, of course, that's fantastic. But those guys are inundated with even more requests than I am. And they take these long form pieces. They can only work on one or two stories at a time. So while it's great to get national attention, in reality, you want to start with local attention, and that builds to national attention eventually. So, here in New York, there's lots of local papers that write for your various neighborhoods. Queens has 4 or 5 of them, and we've started talking to those people about the case. And they're normally young people who are looking to write. Everyone likes to write about these cases. Every single case of a wrongful conviction is an interesting story. There's no dull wrongful conviction story. It's an oxymoron. They all systemically, every single wrongful conviction case talks about almost all of the systemic problems in the system. So if you can find someone to write about it and get that started, that's a good way to start getting attention. Um, and then that'll then build. And then when you file a motion on it or something new breaks on it, maybe go to the next level, maybe write to like a Newsday or a Times journalist or someone in a bigger scope and say, this story was covered in the Queen's Courier, and now we're taking the next step. We found new evidence, and you start building it that way. And then adding all of that to your website and your database, kind of gives you some more credibility. One of the things that you do have to be careful about in posting to social media sites is don't ever do it to the detriment of your case. So if you're trying to track down a witness who may not want to talk, you don't want to go out there and start saying, hey, today's the day we're going to start hunting down, John Smith, because then John Smith will make himself scarce. So nothing matters. No one ever got out because of national attention. People only get out because of hard work and persistence, which is the most important um, personality trait you could have if you want to do this. So always measure that against does it hurt the case. So never take a step that could have any potential impact to damage what you want to do. So always gauge very carefully before you let the media in on anything or post anything to a website. Is this helpful? How is this helpful? That being said, one of the ways that we did exonerate Cal Buari was because someone saw some flyers that we put out in the neighborhood. The family just started posting flyers all around the neighborhood year after year after year. They finally created a website. They finally paid for a private investigator. And then someone saw the flyer, knew somebody who knew something about the case, and had actually been withholding that information. They went to the website, contacted the investigator, and 2 years later, we were able to file a motion to get him exonerated. But it all started with, a flyer that they put out on a telephone pole, actually, which I guess is the old form of social media before there was the internet. So, I mean, you never know what's going to work, and you never know what is going to be a dead end, and you have to pursue both with the same amount of energy and objectivity. It's very hard to tell a family member, we tracked down this witness, and it didn't lead anywhere, but until you close that door, it's always going to be open, and you're going to waste energy, um, you know, not going that way. You'll never know whether it would lead to something. So you have to pursue that. When possible, one of the first things you and your investigator, or you and your lawyer, or you and someone else who wants to get involved in the case, is go to the scene of the crime. I've tried lots of cases. I've never tried a case without going to the actual scene and just getting some perspective. Pictures will never, ever do it justice to actually placing yourself there and seeing what there is to be seen. It's going to make you ask more questions. Were these traffic lights there? When were these traffic lights installed? How long has that been there? You'd be surprised what visiting the scene will do to open your mind about ways to attack a case. So I would always say that's a starting point. But even that I don't like to do until I've seen the relevant documents in the case, so I know what to look for. And that's always the starting point, like Lisa mentioned, which is getting some of the principal documents in the case, and then focusing a plan as to what steps would I have to take to exonerate this person. And then finally, this is an area that in many ways is a pandemic. Um, you know, when I go to to various groups and talk about wrongful conviction, similarly, like we don't know how many people have COVID because the symptoms keep changing, and some people may have recovered, and some people may have died without being diagnosed. You hear a lot about wrongful conviction in cases that are murder cases that took a very, very long period of time. But um, we have to know that folks who pled guilty or were convicted of robberies and did 5 years, assaults, muggings, even car thefts, all kinds of cases that left them with short prison terms of, let's say, anywhere from 2 to 10 years. No one's ever going to look at those cases. But we have to know that many of those were wrongful convictions as well. And for many requests that we get, there is just no way to exonerate a person. Many times we have to write the family back and say, there is no avenue. You've exhausted all your legal appeals. There is no witness out there. There is no DNA to test. And I don't know what we can possibly do for you. And that's very, very frustrating. So all the more reason when you get involved in a case where there is a potential way out, you've really just got to, focus on it. Don't take more than you handle. Don't overpromise, and focus it on a step-by-step basis. And, just keep the ball rolling, so to speak, until you finally have enough to file a motion. Because you have to understand something. In every state in the union, once you make an argument, okay, once that argument is addressed by a court, it generally cannot be remade. And we have had lots of situations where inmates, frustrated with their, wrongful incarceration, have filed motion after motion on every little issue that they found and have then blown that issue. In the case that Lisa mentioned that I worked on, a case called David Michelen and Willie Stuckey, David did 29 years for a murder that he didn't commit. He got in at 16, and we exonerated him at 45. But one of the reasons it took 10 years was because David, in his effort to exonerate himself, filed motion after motion as he found each little piece that he thought could help him. And it ended up meaning that we couldn't use those arguments until we had newly discovered evidence, and then put it all together in a plea for actual innocence. So sometimes you want to tell the family it might behoove you to wait until you gather a couple of pieces and not just keep attacking it piecemeal at a time. You could be ending up doing yourself some more harm. So that basically responds to the questions that I had. I love doing this because it takes a village. It does. There's absolutely no way to do this by yourself. I can't tell you, I spoke today to Rita DeVay, who's a lawyer who does wrongful conviction. She just wanted to bounce ideas off of me. I looked at a brief that she filed. Marty Tankliff and I regularly communicate on cases. Jabbar Collins, who was another exoneree who got himself out of jail. Jeff Deskovic and I, he brought me into Andy Krivak's case. All of us have been down the road, but a fresh look at a case and a fresh set of eyes is always so helpful. Okay, nobody has all the answers. No one has all the angles. Everyone's been through different things. So sharing this kind of information in these groups is vitally, vitally important, because A, it could save you time, and B, it could just lead you down a path that you might never have considered. So I'm always ready, willing, and able to join in these discussions and talk ideas out or answer questions, because frankly, it's the only way innocent people ever get out.
Well, we really appreciate your time. And I've had another question that someone just private messaged me that's on our Zoom. And they said, should I avoid calling out the present district attorney on how he won't let Julius Jones's attorney see his case file? Just wondering if we should stay away from making him mad. And I think this is a good point, whether it be a district attorney or an officer or a prosecutor or whatever, this could come in handy for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, public shaming might be the only way, but I would suggest not to take that step until every bridge before that step has been burned and you're sure you have the goods. Have you given him an opportunity? Have you explained why you need it? Have you sought the proper legal recourse? Because once you do take that step, you'll always have that little mark. Okay, this is a pain in the ass that tried to, publicly humiliate me. And, I'll put a public face on that looks good, but I'm secretly going to say, I have no interest in helping these people. It still remains true to this day. You attract more, flies with honey than you do with vinegar. But at the same time, sometimes, you got to bring out the raid can also. And so that's a judgment call. It's going to be on a case by case basis. And certainly we only do that. And we did that with Joe Hines, who was the former Brooklyn DA, when, all rational attempts to communicate with him failed. But take a look at what's happening in Brooklyn in the John Juca case. I know, Lisa, you're familiar with that. And there, they've tried everything they could to get the Brooklyn DA's office to look at the case. So they're trying to bring public attention to it by challenging the DA. But that's a last step, I would think, that they took. That's the course of last resort. Because ultimately, nothing helps you more than getting the DA to help you. A lot of it's going to depend on whether that DA came from the office at the time of the wrongful conviction. If they're new and they're fresh blood, they're going to be more open to it. So there's no generic answer to that, but it's similar to the way I talked about posting on your website. You have to make that determination in your case, whether it helps you more than it hurts you. And certainly if you've gone down every road and haven't been able to do it and get the DA's attention, then you're not burning anything. You might as well. And that's where you might go to a reporter, by the way. Maybe you don't do it publicly. Maybe you get a local reporter who, is looking for a story at this angle, and can do that for you and say, why isn't this being done? And you might get information that way that'll prepare you better when you finally do want to shame them, saying, this is what they've done, this is what they've told, the local paper, and still we get no recourse.
I'm sorry, I'm getting more messages about questions for today. If you want to submit your questions to me, and then we can use these in a future chat, then I think that would be a great idea. I think when we get more specific, then it's more helpful to people and what their challenges are. So please do send the questions to me, either a private message, Facebook message, email, whatever, and then we will try to hit those in our next Zoom meeting. Oscar, thank you so much for your time and all of your great information, for being willing to put up with me sometimes in my email questions and reminders and whatnot. So I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm always glad to join. And I meant what I said. It's really, very important, and I enjoy doing it. So please let me know when the next one is, and I'll always try and come on if I can.
I will definitely keep you posted on when we schedule the next meeting. And so next we are going to go to Lori, and Lori she has a background in massage, self-care, all of these things that are so great. And so I'm going to hand it over to her for our last little segment.
Hey everybody, welcome. Oscar, thank you so much for joining us and giving us these tips. I know, most of us don't have any kind of a legal background. Most of us have jobs that we work 40 hours a week, and also children and families that we're taking care of. And then we're also spending time on these cases and oftentimes to our own detriment. You know, we're up long hours, we're stressed out about things we're trying to do for these individuals, and we end up not taking care of ourselves the way that we need to. And so one of the things that Lisa and I have talked about over the years, because she and I have been friends for a couple of years now, and we actually bonded over the wrongful conviction thing, because I was looking for someone who was doing the same type of work that I was doing, and I came across Lisa on Instagram and reached out to her, and it was really nice to have someone who understood what I was going through. And so we've talked a lot about taking care of ourselves, because one thing I can say about Lisa, she's a champion for justice. She works tirelessly, but sometimes she forgets to take care of Lisa. And so she's come a long way, and I'm really proud of her, because she's done a great job in the last year or so, taking better care of herself so that she can work harder on these cases and do more for other people. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about with self-care, first of all, is that physical self-care is so important. So with physical self-care, we all think about getting a massage or getting a manicure or a pedicure, and those things are great. Those are treats, and we should definitely do those. But some of the best things you can do for physical self-care is, one, drink water. Drink lots and lots of water. I see water bottles going around right now. A good, yeah, there you go, Karen. A good rule of thumb when you think about drinking water is to drink half of your body weight in fluid ounces every day. So that keeps you hydrated and keeps your body working optimally when you're dealing with other things. So first and foremost, drink water. Secondly, make sure you're getting enough restful sleep. So one of the tough things about making sure that we're getting enough restful sleep is that we want to be sure to put any devices aside before we get ready to go to bed. Give ourselves a good 30 to 45 minutes before we go to sleep. I am very guilty of not doing this. I'm sure everyone that I can see right now is guilty of not doing this. So at least put your night shift on, so you change the spectrum of light coming out of your device if you can't put it down. But try to give yourself a good 30 minutes of unwind time before you go to sleep at night, and try to get a good 6 to 8 hours of sleep if at all possible that's not broken. And then thirdly, for your physical health, you want to make sure that you're getting some kind of exercise every day. Even if it's walking, that's great. If you can add a little bit of cardio and maybe run, walk, or use a bike, an elliptical, or a rowing machine, something like that to get your heart rate up. And then some basic body weight strength training, or some lightweight strength training. Just I see mostly females on here, so I'll say, you know, be careful of knees and joints. You know, don't overdo it, don't overstress your joints, but definitely make sure you're getting that physical self-care. Secondly would be your emotional self-care. You know, we have a lot that goes on in our lives every day, just as human beings. And certainly right now we're going through a lot, because many of us are feeling isolated. And for the first time, we're really able to be super empathetic with our loved ones that are incarcerated wrongfully, because we are starting to sort of understand what it feels like, except that to them, they probably think, yeah, but you're in the Taj Mahal, right? So we're all stuck at home, but we have lots of room and we have everything we need, but still we feel stifled and we feel alone. So make sure during this time you're really doing a good job of taking care of yourself emotionally. Tune into your emotions, check in, ask yourself how you're feeling. Be real about your feelings, feel them. If you want to cry, cry. Once you release those feelings, they're gone. But when you hold them in and you deny them, you know, you're hurting yourself, you're harming yourself. So make sure to do things that can help release those emotions, and then find things to do like journaling or meditation, things like that, to help you deal with the emotions that might be causing you to not be able to relax and take the best care of yourself. Thirdly is your spiritual self-care. So whatever your higher power is, just stay tuned into your higher power. Make sure that you're taking time each day to pray, meditate, nourish your soul. Do things that make your soul feel good. I always say, let your soul shine, because my massage therapy studio was called Soul Shine Therapeutic. So that was my thing, do the things that help your soul to shine. Social self-care is another thing that we forget about sometimes. To take care of ourselves socially, I think there are two components of that. One, I touched on earlier, when Lisa and I found each other, it was a really good social outlet for both of us, because we were both learning and navigating our way through these wrongful conviction cases. We were able to become friends and bond over that, share our frustrations and our joys, and just have someone to bounce things off of and to vent to. But you also need some social self-care that's outside of this group of people. So make sure you're taking time to see other friends who aren't connected necessarily in this wrongful conviction movement, and take time to step away from it and do other things. I know for me, I struggle with that, because the least little thing, when I'm out doing things, the least little thing can make me think about Joe's case. And Joe's a wrongfully convicted friend that I advocate for here in Tennessee. And I can find myself, talking about his case or things, and we should do that. But there are times when we should step away from it too, and just, let our hair down, have a good time, be with friends, and just enjoy quote unquote normal conversation. So make sure that you're taking time, and it's okay to do that, and we shouldn't feel guilty about that. I know we all probably struggle with feeling guilty when just for one moment we're not thinking about these cases. But, they always say you can't pour from an empty cup. And when you're on the plane, they always tell you to put your mask on first. So make sure you're doing things that feel normal for yourself, so that you can have every single ounce of energy later to help work on these cases. And then last would be sensory self-care. So one of the things that I like to do is use essential oils, and I know a lot of people use those. I put them in a diffuser. I use a lot of different blends so that I can get a nice uplifting smell in the house, and I'll listen to some nice smooth jazz in the background and sort of, take care of my senses that way. Chocolate's a good sensory, it feels good in your mouth, it tastes good. Dark chocolate is actually good for you. It lowers your stress levels. So, think about your senses, and think about things that feel good to your senses. And if anybody's interested, I have tons of essential oil recipes that I can share with the group. Lots of relaxing ones for bedtime, uplifting ones for morning. You can get a diffuser from Amazon for 20, 30 bucks. And you can buy some pretty good essential oils through Amazon too, and they're still delivering within 1 or 2 days. So those are just some basic things to remember. We are more than just a physical body, and we're doing great work. Everybody on here is on here because they have a good heart. They have a heart for helping people. And the fact that you're doing that says something about who you are as a person. So, just remember to take care of yourselves. Does anybody have any self-care questions? I know the last thing we wanted to do was go through a little guided meditation, but I wanted to see if there was anything anybody wanted to ask before we move into that.
I'm unmuting everyone right now.
Okay, we'll give them a second.
This is the only way I knew how to keep control.
Hey, it's the way you have to do it. If not, we'll just go into the meditation.
Does anyone have any questions right now?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, we're good.
All right. So what I'm going to do, guys, is have everybody just close your eyes. And we're going to go into a meditation. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is start by relaxing your muscles. If any thoughts come to mind, just disregard them. Think, oh well, and just let it pass through. Turn your attention back to your body. Let your muscles become loose and relaxed. Start with your feet. Wiggle your toes with your ankles. Just rock your ankles back and forth. Your torso, your back. Drop your shoulders. Feel your arms relax, your hands, your face. Let all the tension drop out of your face, and your head. Just move your head from side to side. Just feel your body. It's loose and relaxed. And now we're going to turn our attention to breathing. Notice each breath. Don't try to change your breath. Just notice your breathing. Observe your breathing. As thoughts arise, you're going to acknowledge them, but just let them go. Return your attention back to your breathing. Just going to bring naturally, slowly. Let your thoughts wander and just return to your breathing. Notice your breath as it flows gently in and out of your body without any effort. Acknowledge any thoughts, but then again, focus on your breathing. Interruptions are normal. We're just going to let them go and return our attention to breathing. Now we're going to think of meaningful words or phrases and say this word in your mind as you exhale. Each time you breathe out, just say the word. If your thoughts wander, bring your attention again to repeating your meaningful statement with each out breath. Just continue repeating each time you breathe out. With passive acceptance, continue to focus on the word or phrase and allow any distracting thoughts to float by. And now slowly begin to reawaken. Turn your attention to your breathing. Notice your breath, calm, smooth, in, out, in, out. Allow your awareness to turn to your body. You feel calm and relaxed. Notice how your body feels. Notice how the tension has drifted away from your body and you're feeling loose and relaxed. Now you're becoming more aware of your surroundings. Let your attention turn back to your thoughts, back to normal consciousness and awareness. Now sit quietly for a moment. Open your eyes. Enjoy the feeling of relaxation, gradually reawakening. Adjust your body position. Reflect on the experience that you had meditating. Notice what it was like. Notice how you feel now. You should feel more relaxed. You should feel a little more at peace. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Roll your shoulders. If you want to stretch, you can stretch. Stretch your neck, roll your shoulders, and just remember to be gentle with yourself as you go into the rest of your evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Where did Lisa go? Where did
Thank
she
you.
go?
I'm here. I'm
That
here.
was awesome.
Good. I'm glad people are happy. That makes me
Yeah,
happy.
yeah.
Hey,
So I'm
Lori,
just
I have
gonna-
a question.
Sure.
So I meditate in the morning before I work out. I do work
Uh-huh.
out 5 days a week. I meditate 5 days, 6 days sometimes. Is it better to do it before or after you do a physical workout?
You can do it either way. I think it's good sometimes to get yourself in a meditative state that gets you ready for whatever exercise you're going to do. Certainly it's good to stretch beforehand, so you can do stretching in a meditative way to prepare yourself for your workout. And then you can do the same thing at the end of the day. I kind of do it in the morning when I start my day and then again at night. So, yeah.
Awesome. Oscar, I didn't know that about you.
Oh, it's
I'm surprised.
changed.
You seem like a very balanced person.
It's really.
Yeah.
I can't recommend it. I can't recommend it enough. Really.
That's
It
awesome.
changes everything, guys. It really does. And it just takes a couple minutes. We didn't do anything except start with the floor. And I didn't say this, but oftentimes I'll sit down and make sure you're grounded so you have both feet on the floor, hands on my knees, and I'll pause for a moment and just collect myself because parts of me might be in other places. But we can maybe do that on a future call to talk about how to gather ourselves up when we might be feeling like parts of us are in 5 different places, kind of come back into yourself completely.
Great. Much ready for participants.
I'm ready to go nighty night.
Right?
That's the only problem.
Well, it's 8 o'clock for some of you guys, but 7 for most of us.
It's only 5 o'clock in California. I haven't
Oh,
even
wow. Yeah. Well, you need to stay awake maybe.
Dinner time.
Right.
Lisa.
There's Lisa.
It keeps like pausing me or,
Oh.
or freezing or something. I'm not sure what the problem is, but
Oh.
anyway, I just want to thank you all for participating. It really means a lot to me. And I hope to be able to do this again in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later. And we'll do a little deeper dive into some of the more specific topics. I've been thinking FOIA requests is something I'd like to get more familiar with. I know an advocate that is a rock star at this. And so I'm hoping to have her participate and help us look at FOIA requests. But if you have other suggestions, please feel free to send me info. I see you, Jennifer. Please feel free to send me suggestions or other questions from tonight, and we will do our best to hit all of those in the future. So thank you so much, and I
Thanks,
pray
Lisa.
you're all staying safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar.
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Great.
John,
Have a nice night. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
John,
Bye.
I need to say thank you for the wonderful job that you did with this case. I sent him some of the screenshots.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Oscar. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Night, Jen.
Bye, Mama.